As a seeker of truth, you desire to develop spiritually, be powerfully transformed, and experience Christ. You take the doctrine that men and women can become like God, our heavenly parents, very seriously, and you want to put in the effort now so that promise can be realized. But perhaps you've struggled to part the veils of unbelief, false beliefs and traditions, assumed identity, mortal challenges, and fear, which conceal the knowledge and wisdom that will enable you to ascend. Latter-day Disciples is designed to help you explore the path of ascension, unfold the mysteries of godliness, and seek to become spiritual kings and queens unto the Most High God. Using resources including the Hidden Wisdom podcast, the Tower in the Garden blog, our online temple course, House of Learning, and Meghan Farner's book, Consider Yourself as Eve, we hope to provide you with what you need to understand your true identity, heal from iniquity, and experience a more intimate relationship with God. We are so excited for you to join this incredible community of like-minded and like-hearted Latter-day Disciples of Christ. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Hidden Wisdom. I am grateful to be joined today by Scott Drummond. Scott was drafted to the Vietnam War at 18. He played all Army basketball and baseball and eventually earned a coveted spot as a professional baller for a German club. While stationed in Germany, he married his sweetheart, Connie. They have been together for 50 years and have been blessed with 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and joyous memories that will last an eternity. Upon his release from the Army, Scott played baseball for BYU. While he attended classes there, the United States Postal Service hired him with an offer he couldn't refuse. After 30 years, Scott retired as a respected postmaster. His interests include sports, vegetable and flower gardening, and traveling as often as possible with his wife, Connie. One of the highlights of Scott and Connie's life together has been serving 2 missions for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The memories and lives they touched will remain in their hearts forever. Scott is also the author of a book called What Dying Taught Me About Living. Proceeds from the book go to his foundation called graciescott.org, which serves children with special needs. His original podcast 3 years ago has over 25 million views, and he enjoys talking to good people around the world. Because Scott knows life should be relished, one of his little indulgences is eating pie before his dinner. I love that. I'm so glad you added that. Scott, it's so great to meet you and have you on the show. Thank you for coming.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on the show. I
Absolutely.
thoroughly enjoy doing these kind of things where I can hopefully help people.
For sure. We did our first interview, our first near-death experience interview with Vinny Tolman, who is a mutual friend of both of us. And we had that back in 2022, perhaps around the same time that you met Vinny. And it's one of our most listened to podcasts. And, if you know Vinny, you know that he is just so full of love and so full of light and goodness and truth. And I reached out to him recently and I said, I need more people like you to come on the show and talk to me. And you were one of the first names that he shared. So I deeply appreciate him introducing us.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm going to be on his podcast next week. So
Yes.
this is quite an honor to be able to do this.
Well, thank you. Yes. And for anyone who doesn't know, Vinny's podcast is newer than ours, but it's called Living God's Light. And he's been having some really wonderful conversations and just sharing things as they really are and just beautiful truth that the world so deeply needs right now. So I'm really grateful that you'll be able to be on that platform as well and share your story there. Well, Scott, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and we can go into your experience of dying and coming back and what that taught you?
Well, it started about 3-4 years ago. A guy in our neighborhood who has a podcast site called Prioritize Your Life asked me if I would do an interview with him because he had heard that I wasn't afraid to die. And I told him that I wasn't afraid to die, but I wasn't going to talk about it. because it's something that I've kept inside for 40 years. He asked me again. He said, I think you can help people. And I said, no, again. The third time he said it, he said, with COVID-19 and with all the people dying and struggling, wanting to know where their family members are gone or friends have gone, I think it could really help a lot of people. And I walked away from him because it wasn't something that I ever shared with people other than a little bit with my wife. When I walked into the door, I laughed at my wife. I said, hey, this guy wants to do an interview on me. He wants me to tell about my story. And he looked at me real serious and said, maybe it's about time he talked about it. And it wasn't something that I wanted. It was something that was so sacred to me and so priceless, the things that I saw and felt, that I didn't feel like I could talk about it. Well, my wife and I are of faith, and she said, why don't we pray about it? And I remember very vividly it came to me, it was all about the one. And I said, I am the one. What do you want with me? And very shortly after that, it came to the 99 and one, that I might be able to help someone if I come forth with my story. And so I did. I called him back in a couple of weeks, and I was still fighting it. If you've ever seen the original video, I was in an old yellow polo shirt and I was all sweaty. I'd been golfing. I didn't want to do this. And my wife and I drove over to the studio, and I was sweating. I mean, this was something I didn't really want to do. And well, when we went in and recorded, I told Wes, I said, Wes, don't ask me any questions. Just let me tell my story. I'm going to walk out of here, and because I know it's going to be over and there won't be anything more said from it. Well, needless to say, it didn't quite go that way, but but the reactions were so incredible from people that would message me. How do you know? How do you know these things? I'll never forget talking to a reporter in Budapest, Hungary, and they ran a special on their national television, and she called me the next morning and said, we just ran a story on you because the viewers wanted to hear about your story. And the only thing she said to me is what you said true? And I said, yes. And she says, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you very much. And hung up. It's these kind of stories that have just been so enlightening. Talking to people in China that are atheists, and they believe their God is their prime minister. And then you talk to people then from the Middle East, from Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan, and they're Muslims. But yet, by the time you get through talking to them, you're their brother, and they claim you as their brother. It doesn't matter what religion we are. I believe the main course of life is how we treat other people. And that's kind of been something that I've had to learn. It's not something I learned overnight, believe me. It happened, my story started when I was 28 years old, and now I'm going on 72. And I'm still learning stuff that I saw, what I felt, and how important it was, that peace that I felt in my life, and how important it was to treat other people with love and respect. And it was not easy because my background was, I came from a broken family. My parents went in different directions. I didn't want to live with either one of them, and I basically lived on the streets. So the part about love was just not part of my life. It was nothing that anybody ever said to me. And that was probably one of the most difficult things after my wife and I got married, was telling her that I loved her, because I never felt that love before. And when Wes asked me to tell the story, I just, it was, it was like somebody was ripping my heart out, because it was something that I've kept inside for so many years. And again, my wife is the only one that knows. Uh, not She didn't know all of what happened to me, but she knew a lot about what had happened. My kids virtually knew nothing. Uh, I'd always been told that through the years, people that have these kind of experiences, that 75% of them get divorces because the two just cannot communicate, because you're thinking differently. When you first get married, you're going down a parallel. And then all of a sudden you have an experience, and this guy goes clear over here. And you're trying to pull them back because that's what you're used to. And so I did not expand on it at all with my wife until I actually came out and told my story. I was 28 years old, and I had been programmed, because of my sports, to make money. And everything in life was about money. And after I got through playing college ball, and I moved on into the business world, it was all about money and how quick I could earn it and get it and acquire things in life. Well, I was doing pretty good. We were on track to retire at 32 years old, and I wasn't ever going to work again, because I was set. I was out in a little town called Jackpot, Nevada, and I was working for the Postal Service. And it was one way that I could move up in the Postal Service. And I'd been gone for about 5 weeks. We got snowed in over there in Jackpot, Nevada, and so I couldn't come home very often. And I was traveling a lot at the time. I'd be gone 3 out of 4 weeks, and the family was kind of becoming distant to me, because it was basically leaving it up to my wife to make all the decisions. One weekend, and it was Christmas weekend, I finally got out of there and came home. And we had a great Christmas. We had 3 kids at the time, and I'd won two $250 jackpots and a $500 jackpot, and we had a very good Christmas. Well, a couple of days after Christmas, I went back into my selfish state again and called a friend of mine, and we went skiing. And we went up to Park City, Utah, which is I love skiing. I've been skiing since I was a little tight, and there's nothing like skiing in fresh powder up to your knee. I can't describe it. It's one of those magical things where you're just going slow motion, and you're just bouncing from one side to the other and just thoroughly enjoying the powder and putting those first runs down on the hill. Well, a friend of mine who was an EMT at the time, we hit those slopes, and we were excited. We went up, and it was cold, and we went down about 3 or 4 runs and came down to the lift line, and I was standing on the lift line, and the out of the corner of my eye, I saw a lady coming down the hill, and poles were just going every which way. And we had been talking in the lift line about, how guys do. We brag about how big the fish are. Well, it was the same thing. How we were jumping off the moguls and making the cuts on the hill and jumping, and we were having a great time. And all of a sudden, just it was like slow motion. I caught that lady. She was in her probably early 30s. She had like a fur hat. It looked like a stacked cake, but she was kind of dressed to the nines. But she looked good on the slopes, but she didn't know how to ski. Well, we were standing in the line, and she came and hit us like a bowling ball hitting pins and knocked over 3 or 4 of us. And we picked her back up, wiped her off, and then just sent her on her way and didn't think anything more of it. Well, we skied the whole rest of the day, and I'll never forget because we were the last ones coming down, and they were sweeping the slopes trying to get everybody off the hill, and went down to the car. And at that time, you could ski right down to your car. And so I skied down, took my boots off, or my skis off, took my boots off, and took my left glove off and took my right glove off. And I lifted my hand up like this, and my thumb was going straight down. What had happened was when I was in the lift line, she tore my thumb completely out of my socket and it was hanging on by the skin. Now you wonder how I didn't feel that. It was so cold. And if you think about gloves, gloves fit you. And so it held it in place the whole time until I took the glove off. Well, my EMT friend said, I can't fix that with a Band-Aid. So we went up to the resort, called my wife, and she got things all set up at the hospital so that I could be operated on as soon as I got down home. And at the time we were living in Orem, and of course the closest hospital is in Provo. So we just went right in there, and they prepped me, they put me on the table, did all the vitals, started running me down the hall on the table and to the operating room. And I'll never forget looking at my wife. I didn't tell her I loved her. I didn't tell her thank you for what she did. I didn't tell her to tell my kids that I loved them. It was almost like it was slow motion. It was something that I had to learn at the time. And they wheeled me into that operating room after telling my wife, well, see you later. And the anesthesiologist got called away on another emergency. But the doctor was very confident that he could do this operation. And the operation is called a bear block. It's I guess it was pretty common back then because he did quite a few of those kinds of operations. But what they do is they lift your arm straight up in the air, they drain all the blood out of your arm, and then they put an air tourniquet right here that has 2 valves on it. And that's so that you close them off so that the medicine in your hand stays in the local. It doesn't affect the rest of your body. So what they did is they pulled my hand down, closed both the valves, and did a local, put lidocaine in where they were going to operate on my thumb. Now, when they did the operation, they put a sheet between me and where they were working on me so that I couldn't see what they were doing. And everything was going fine. I mean, I could hear them talking, and they were asking me how I was doing, and I told them I was doing great. And hurry up, I need to get out of here because I got things I got to do. And all of a sudden, pressure started coming on my arm. And the natural thing to do is the doctor told the nurse to just loosen one of the valves, and that would release pressure going down my arm. And the nurse did it. Now, one thing I need to say is the nurse had never done this type of an operation before, but she was confident that the doctor would be able to talk her through what she needed to do. And she did just fine that time. Well, we were into the operation a little longer, and all of a sudden I started feeling pressure in my arm again. It was just building up. And what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to tighten the first one down and then loosen the second one, and that kind of relieves the pressure. Unfortunately, what she did is she opened the valve and didn't close the other valve. And I felt the medicine go up my arm, across my chest, and into my heart. And the next thing I felt was my body lifting out of my body and going up above, and I was watching the operation from up above. It felt so natural. It was so natural that I would lift it up. It was my soul was leaving my body, my spirit, if you want to call it. And I was standing up there, but I wasn't alone. There was another person that was right beside me. And we stood right there and we watched this operation. And we watched the nurse, when the machines flatlined, watched her running out of the room saying that she'd killed me. And the fear that she had in her voice and in her eyes was just, it was very alarming. Well, when she was running out, an emergency team come running in and they started working on me and shocking my heart and cutting my clothes open and putting little monitors all over me. And we sat up above and was just watching this operation, my escort and I. What was unique was the escort, when he would talk to me, was through my mind. I could hear everybody audibly down on the floor working on me. And it was interesting to watch the doctor. He was so diligent in what he was doing. The emergency team was taking care of what they were supposed to do, but he continued to work on me. And I watched him cut me in my arm right here, cut me on my wrist and right up here. And he took a tendon out and he wrapped it around my thumb. And he was just doing what he was supposed to do to repair the thumb to give it more strength. And I remember so specifically one of the pins that he put in me um, was just a fraction too long. And he was so precise. He pulled it back out, trimmed it down, and I'm watching him put all this in my thumb. And it turned out real good. I didn't get to see all of the stitches being put in me because when it was time, my escort next to me, or my guardian angel, or whatever you want to call them, said it was time to go. And there was no question at all that it was time to go. And we went somewhere that was the most beautiful place that I can ever describe to anybody. I was standing in a field and I had my escort to the left of me this time, where before, when I was down the operating table, he was on the right side of me. I don't think there's anything, to compare why one was on one side, one on the other. But I remember he was just out of sight, but he was on my left side. And it was so comfortable. It was so natural. And I remember him specifically saying through my mind that I was never to look back again. I could look to the left, I could look to the right, I could look in front of me, but I wasn't allowed to look back anymore. And I was able to stand there and observe, the grass right in front of me were long strands of green grass with gold tips on them, and they were all flowing towards me as if each one of them had a soul and they were sharing love with me. To my far left was trees, tall trees that the most unusual trees that I have ever seen. They had a long trunk, they had leaves up at the top, and they were various colors of reds and greens. But yet the thing I noticed was the bottoms were a gold color. And I was just had the opportunity to study what was around me. It wasn't until about 4 months ago that I actually found out what those trees were. I always thought that they were a sequoia tree because I had nothing that I could compare to them, but they was not exactly like it. And I had a friend that sent me a picture of a tree, and he said, "Is this what that tree looks like?" And it's the first time I'd ever seen a baobab tree. The baobab tree is in Madagascar. And that tree in Madagascar is labeled as the tree of life because it holds about 1,000 gallons of water. And that water is what sustains the people that live there. And they actually pass it on from trees on from generation to generation. It's like an inheritance because it's water, and that country is full of drought. I can't tell you how good it felt to finally see the trees that I saw when I was standing in that field. Well, the trees were there was quite a few of them, and they were kind of like pillars going up towards this cloud. Between the trees and me were flowers. And these flowers I've never seen colors like these before in my life. But the unique thing about these flowers was every petal was facing towards me. Every leaf was facing towards me. And they were all leaning towards me as if to give me all the attention or love or peace that I needed at the time. It was the most incredible feeling that I've ever had. Usually you have to walk all the way around a flower to see all the petals, but every one of these flowers were facing towards me. And I remember there was no wind. It was just pure standstill. But yet everything was flowing towards me. It was the most beautiful feeling. It was like every one of them had a soul. And it made me realize that why wouldn't they have a soul? Uh, I, you know, sometimes you need to be woke up a little bit. You see flowers all the time. You don't think of those kind of things, but it was very real what I saw. And I remember putting my hands out over the top of them because they came up to about my waist, the flowers and the grass. And I put my hands out and I could feel an energy that I had never, ever felt before. And I also felt love that I had never, ever felt before. And because of that love, it gives you a lot of peace. Well, after observing what I did and seeing the cloud up in front of me, I and looking to my left, I felt that person gone that was with me. I was there by myself. And generally, when you're by yourself, you get anxiety, you get nervous, you wonder, why am I here? Where am I going? What's next? It was not that way at all. It felt so natural. But what happened next was something that is so hard to explain to people because I watched my life. Um, I get the chills every time I even talk about this because we're all going to have to go through a life review. And unfortunately, at that time, I was not on the right track. I didn't see any of my money there. I didn't see any of my toys there. But what I felt was love. I started this out by seeing all the way from when I was born, when my Heavenly Mother handed me to my mother and entrusted her with taking care of me here on earth, all the way until I was 28 years old. I saw things that were good. I saw things that was not so good. But the interesting part was everything that I was seeing, it was a learning process. I wasn't made to feel guilty. I wasn't to be made feel bad. What I saw was everything was black and white. There was no fence in the middle. There was no gray matter at all. And I remember so many times seeing people that playing sports, when you play sports, you got to be just this much better to move to the next level. And it doesn't matter whether it's gone from little league to Babe Ruth to high school ball to college ball or going to the professional. You have to be that much better And sometimes when you do that, sometimes you hurt people along the way. And it's not only that in sports, but it's in the business world too. I wanted to move up so fast that I didn't care who I stepped on. And the sad part is when I was going through the life review, is some of those people were going through really tough times. They had lost a family member, but yet they were interviewing for a job that I wanted, and I was going to take it from them. And I felt their emotions. And when you start feeling other people's emotions, it, it's really hard to handle. But it was not done in uh, a destructive way. I wasn't being tormented, beat up. It was in a way that it was so that I could learn from the experience. And that was not you know, when you go through something like that, you go, okay, I did it. Nobody else did it. Nobody else is here. There's nobody here to talk to or give an excuse to, or you just, okay, I did it. And you go, okay, well, I'm ready to move forward. And I stood there for a few minutes and realized that, I could have done better when I was here. And I knew I could have done better. I hurt people. I didn't treat my wife very well. I didn't ever tell her that I loved her because I never heard that when I was growing up. But I did inside, but I never knew how to express it to her. And when it was over, like I said, you just accept what happened to you. And I was standing there, and all of a sudden, a voice came that I was to walk forward. Now, everything that where I was at was like in a panoramic type view. I could see a long ways to the left. I could see a long ways to the right. The cloud that was in front of me was not very far away, but I was instructed never to look back. And so I started to walk forward. But one of the most unusual things happened was when I started to walk in back of the clouds, there were three of them, by the way. There was two on the sides that were pure white. One in the middle was kind of a pearl color. And the only way I can describe that to people is if you've ever seen a car that has a pearl paint job, you see blues and purples and black. Well, that's what the middle cloud was. It was just beautiful. When I started to walk forward, rays started to come out from behind the clouds as if to pull me towards the clouds. And as I started walking, the flowers turned and was following me, and the grass was following me as if to push me. And it was the most peaceful, loving comfort I have ever felt because I was being surrounded on all sides of my body to move forward towards this cloud. The rays pulling me and the flowers and grass pushing me. And I walked up to that cloud, and it was so pure. I I can't tell you how pure that cloud was. Then an arm came through the cloud, about this much of the arm. I don't know if you can see that or not, but just right there. And he put his hand out as if to welcome me. And I haven't talked a lot about this, but time was not an issue. There was no such thing as time. It was just pure peace that I felt. And I stood there, and I got a chance to study the arm. And I remember the upper part of the arm was really strong. I mean, really strong. But the way that the arm was coming through the cloud, he was taller than me. And I'm 6'3", so I'm not short. But I know that because of the angle, I could tell this must be a big man. And his arms were bigger than mine. And, you know, I don't like to admit it, but I'm 260, but he was bigger arms than me. And his fingers, I remember, were just meaty. And they made my fingers look like they were small. And, you know, the first thing that came to my mind was he either was a farmer or worked construction or even a carpenter. And I was instructed to take his hand, and I reached for his hand and I got this close. And I felt energy going through my body that I had never, ever experienced in my life. And the only way I can explain it is when you're sitting there and all of a sudden you get a chill in your body and you just kind of shake and you go, whoa, where'd that come from? Well, this radiated through my whole body. And it was, like I said, it was an energy that was just, it was unbelievable. I can't even describe how good it felt. But I got almost to his hand and the arm started to pull back into the cloud. And I went to grab for that hand. I wanted that hand. I felt something that I had never ever felt before, and I was grabbing for it. And then it disappeared in, and he said to me, "It is not yet your time. You have more things yet to do." And that has stuck in my mind for over 40 years. Every day, it's like Groundhog Day to me. I see exactly where I was standing, what I felt, and how much I desired to be there again. It felt so peaceful and so pure. Now, something that I didn't say was when I was studying that arm and the hand, it was so pure that I did not see color. It was the most unusual thing. It wasn't white, it wasn't black, it wasn't red, it wasn't brown. It was pure. And I've tried to put a color to it many times, and I cannot do it because it was so pure. And that's people around the world don't quite understand that. And how do I explain that? I can't explain it other than it was just pure. And when I was sent back, I did not want to come back because I felt something I'd never felt before. I went back into my body. I was on the operating table. I was being wheeled out. I had a sheet over my head and I had a death certificate that was on my chest that I'd been dead for 20 minutes. I experienced laying there being in a war. Because when I was in the other state, I felt no pain. No pain. There was no such thing as pain. But when I came down on the table, my thumb hurt so bad that I felt pain. And I watched when I came down, watched the doctor taking his scrubs off. I watched him over there washing his hands, and he was in anguish because he was about to go tell my wife that he'd lost me on the operating table. I flipped the sheet. Well, let me put it back up. The orderly dropped his clipboard on my chest, and I moved. And the orderly called the doctor back over and said, "I think you better come over here and take a look at this," because he was just about to wheel me out in the hallway and I guess take me down into where they put people that have died in a morgue type thing. I flipped the sheet off, scared the orderly half to death. The doctor went white as a goat. And after them standing there for a few minutes, they started to wheel me out. And what they did is they wheeled you out past where the operating room was, or the waiting room was, where my wife was. Now, my wife had been out there all day. Well, not all day, from, I don't know, 5 or 6 o'clock on. But at the time, there were a whole room full of people. And Connie was the last one in there when the doctor wheeled me out. And her experience was not the same experience as mine. The doctor went out there and said, everything went okay. We lost him, but we brought him back. And my wife, her emotions went crazy because the first thing that she thought about was losing her husband, having to raise 3 kids by herself, because we only had 3 kids at the time, and where she was going to work. She actually fell back into the chairs because of the fear that she felt from what the doctor had to say. That they put me in the ICU because they couldn't figure out how I did what I did and how I came back, and after them pronouncing me dead. And they watched me for 3 days. And I remember the doctor coming into the ICU and asking me questions about, what were you talking about? Where did you go? And all I could tell him is the colors were just absolutely magnificent. I'd never seen colors like that before. We see a 6-color wheel here. I saw a 10-color wheel. So I saw colors that we don't have here. And they were just absolutely beautiful. Well, needless to say, he was really nice to me for those 3 days while I was in the ICU. He made my wife feel very comfortable. I think he was afraid he might get sued, for what happened, but it turned out okay. I remember the last day we were in there. There was a reporter from one of the news stations. I'm not going to name what news station it was, but they came in. They were doing a story on near deaths, people that had died and come back. And he came into the room, and he'd already interviewed many other people, and he wanted to hear my story. And I said, "No, you're not going to hear my story." And it was it's something that I'll never forget. It's an experience that I knew I had to learn from, and it changed my wife and I's paths. I actually told her on the way out of the operating room that I loved her, and she started crying because it wasn't anything she'd heard before come out of my mouth. Just nothing that I ever said. And we kind of changed paths a little bit. I found out that money wasn't as important as I thought it was supposed to be, and how hungry I needed to be to move up and where I was working. We decided to get to know each other, and we decided that I needed to find out who my kids were. My kids were, well, they'd have been probably 22, 28. So my oldest would have been 6 or 7 years old, and when she had 3 kids. So I had to get to know my family over again. Well, I didn't learn everything overnight. I'm a guy. Guys don't learn things overnight. Things were going really good for about 10 years, and I was starting to make money again. And a friend of mine, his wife went in to have a baby, and it was my birthday in a couple of days. And so we thought we'd go out and celebrate and go golfing. And I was supposed to be watching the kids that day. My wife was gone to a women's conference, and I left my friend's baby, who was 2 years old, with my 7-year-old. We went golfing. We were on the third hole of the golf course, and we saw a storm coming in over the lake. And you're familiar with Utah, but it was called Cascade Springs up in the mouth of Provo Canyon. And we thought we could beat it. And we got to the 8th hole, and I'd made a putt that was just unbelievable. And I was so excited that I made this 40-foot putt. All of a sudden, hair on my arms and the back of my neck started standing straight up. And the next thing I knew, I got hit by lightning. And we both got knocked down. Frank, his back, his L4, L5 melded together, and he saw smoke coming out of the top of my head. He thought I was dead. The first thing I thought of was, I got it. You don't have to tell me again. I got it. And the only thing that was on my mind at that time was to get Frank to the hospital. And I remember going down and getting the car and driving it up on the golf course and picking him up. And his wife was on the 3rd floor having a baby, and he was up on the 6th or 7th floor in excruciating pain with his back. And I had to go downstairs to the 3rd floor and tell his wife what had happened. Sometimes guys have to be humbled, and I'm one of them, because I'm driven and I'm task oriented, and I see things through to the very end. But I don't see what's going on around me. I'm straightforward focused. Another lesson that I had to learn. My wife and I I received a job back in Washington, D.C. I was going back there. I was moving up rather quickly. Again, working for the Postal Service. And my wife and I made a decision after that happened that we didn't need that anymore. And I turned down the job back there and took a small postmaster job and decided I needed to get back on track. Now, I never got checked out after the lightning hit me. And about three and a half years later, I started developing hemiplegic migraines. And hemiplegic migraines is where your veins in your head close down, and it acts as if you're having a stroke. And you start losing all of your faculties, generally on one side. I paid for it, going and getting hit by lightning. And I've been paying for it ever since. But every time I have one of those attacks where my veins are closing down, it's a new lesson that I have to learn. And I know that that's why they happen. It's to mainly keep me in check, make sure that I don't get back off track again. And, I'm not perfect. But one thing I will say is I try every day to do just a little bit better. When we came out and decided to tell my story, we went in and started a foundation, because whatever was going to come from this book, we were going to put into this foundation to help kids with special needs. Because this isn't my story. Yes, I'm telling it, but this story was a lesson that I had to learn. And I do not want to go back and do another life review and say I made money on an experience that I was supposed to learn from. The book, What Dying Taught Me About Living, is my story. And I couldn't write the story. I had a ghostwriter by the name of Sandy Ponton write the story for me. I told her what needed to go in it. I told her everything that happened, but she did the editing and did it very, very well. We had quite an experience writing it. When it came out in August of 23, in January, two producers approached me and said they wanted to do a movie on my story. And I wouldn't sell them the rights to it because I wouldn't be able to talk about my story. And they came back and made me a co-producer because they wanted to make sure that the movie paralleled the book, and that was my responsibility. The script is written. It is so, they've done such a fantastic job. You know, anytime you sell your rights, you expect that it's just going to be fabricated, and it's mainly to put butts in the seats. Sorry for the French, but that's kind of the way the movie industry works. But they have done a very good job of making this work. And this, like I said, the script's done. We're just waiting for the investors to come forward, and we've had the analysis all done through Hollywood. We've had some great reviews. We're hoping that we'll be able to put more kids into camps and give them ABA programs, and not only help the kids, but we're finding that it's the families that need the help too. Because when you have a child with special needs, a mother has to put a lot of effort and time into that child, and the rest of the kids kind of suffer. And so we're finding that we need to help not only the child get into special programs and camps, but to also help the family be more united and give them a good experience. We've had so much fun with the foundation. It's better than my story. It is the faces, the people, I can't express how humble it makes you feel to be able to help other people. And, you know, there's so many of us that we have things. You know, we have our food, we have a place to live, but we have so many opportunities to help other people. And this is a great life. I can't believe I'm actually here now talking about it, because I know where I've been. And I hope and pray that my life review will be just this much better than it was the first time, because it was a tough experience to learn from. I had so many people I had to go back and apologize to because I didn't know that I'd hurt them in the way that I did. You know, it's all about hope. Everybody needs a little hope. And I'm going to tell you, life is precious. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate all of that. I got emotional because I have a daughter with special needs, and so I deeply appreciate your ministry and how you've used these experiences that you've been given. Because you're right, it's hard, and I'm really grateful that you're giving that help to families who need it. There were a couple of things that I'd love to just ask you about, or just point out from your experience, that I think just to highlight, and to share. I really love, um, and I respect the challenge also of having this life review. And this is something that I hear pretty consistently from people who have had near death experiences, is that this is a thing.
It's
um,
real.
Yes. This is a thing, and, but I wanted to highlight too what you felt, that there was no judgment behind it. This was not, you have to see what you did and, you are punished for it. I love that it was just about love and learning, and the people that I've heard who did feel a sense of judgment, that was an internal experience, that they were judging themselves. Is that something that you can speak to or affirm?
Well, you can't argue about it.
Mhm.
What it is what it is.
Mhm.
I mean, there's no fake. It's not fake. It's
Mhm.
what it is. You did
Right,
it and you face it and you just move forward.
right. And learning how to forgive ourselves, I think is a key part of that, right? Of learning
Yeah.
that God is not judging us, we're the one who judges ourselves, and as long as we're holding on and judging ourselves, that, I think, is the thing that inhibits us from moving forward. And so learning to cultivate that self-forgiveness, and that I love that, just accountability of like, "Yep, that did that, not great, but what do I do next?" You know?
I did
Like,
it.
how do
Well,
we learn and move
we
on?
we have all of us have the privilege of either doing good or bad. I
Mhm,
mean, we were given that opportunity when we came down here.
mhm,
We make our choices, and if they're good, we live by them. If they're bad, we live by them.
yeah.
And I something I didn't say before was I recognize those voices. I will never ever forget my guardian angel's voice, and I will never forget that voice that I heard behind that cloud. And I have heard that voice many, many times before, and it was so I recognized it. I know that voice, and I can't wait to hear it again.
I also loved your experience. You mentioned seeing Heavenly Mother give you to your mom, and our audience is one that we are very much aware of Heavenly Mother, and we seek to know her, especially as women, recognizing that this is who we're aspiring to become like. Can you give us any details about that experience? Did you see anything about her, anything that you felt from witnessing her?
You know, the thing that I probably noticed the most is how pure it was. She entrusted my mother with me to take care of me. I I've thought about that many, many times. Could a mother give somebody else their child and trust that they'll take good care of them for you? You know, I I haven't talked about this subject a lot because our heavenly mother is guarded. She's protected, and I believe that God protects her because he respects her. But she is real. You know, I again, the energy I felt when she was given me to my mother and then her laying her on her chest was life. Uh, Man and women are made so different. Women can do 10 things at once. A man has to stay focused on one thing until it's finished. But a woman can do service, they can nurture, they can be there to hold their family members where they're hurting, and the mother hurts with them because they come from her. A man can't feel those kind of things. We can't. We cannot even. I can't even. I have a hard time talking to my wife about this stuff because I can't understand what she is going through emotionally. Uh, the love a mother has for a child is beyond anything I could even describe. Because the look in her eyes when she gave me to my mother was pure love. And when you talk about pure love, it's unconditional. And I felt that through my whole experience, that it was pure, unconditional love. It didn't matter what I did, it was unconditional. It's almost like, yeah, God says, go down there, make a mess of your life if you want to. I still want you to come back. I still want to see you because He loves you. I think that's why so many guys love their mothers. I lost my mother a few years ago, and I yearn for her because I know she gave me birth and helped raise me. She nurtured me. She loved me. Even though they got divorced, she did things that I didn't know she was doing behind the scenes because she loved me. And it's a love that I can't, I wished I could describe that energy from a mother's love. It's pure.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It's really beautiful, that imagery. And I think for me, it really confirms how special women are as mothers, that we are these portals, these vessels that connect to heaven. I love the idea that we are all connected to our Heavenly Mother. She's the one
Mhm.
who we receive life from her, and we bestow that life on others, and that love as well. And so I just really appreciate you sharing that very sacred part of your experience that I imagine sometimes people don't quite understand, but I see it, and I deeply appreciate that. One last question, and then I'll let you go. At the beginning of the episode, you made the comment that religion doesn't matter. What matters is how we treat each other. Can you expand on that? I think that in our tradition, we tend to get fixated on the idea of there's only one right way to do life. And I have learned what you have learned, that that is not true. But can you share with us your wisdom on that point?
You know, I learned that obviously it takes an army to raise a family. You know, that the mother and father can give it all they got, but you have to have a lot of support. And I learned that after my experience. I was not very religious. Yeah, I knew about the church and yeah, but I was not, my testimony was not real strong. But I can tell you now there is a God. I know there's a God. If I can't deny it, if I do, I'm going to get probably hit by lightning again. So, but I know that there is a God, and we have a lot to learn. You know, I feel very fortunate to be able to have leaders in the church that can give me guidance. And it's not only a lot of it is just being kind to other people. You know, give service. You know, it's not about, like, again, not all about money. It's about helping other people. And I I love doing it because when when you have an experience like mine, you realize that you have a gift coming back. First of all, you have a gift to kind of make it a little bit better. I always ask everybody that's been through an experience like this, what kind of gifts did they come back with? And I came back with several good gifts. And one of them is that little voice that tells me, you need to help that person. And I know that if I deny it, it's going to leave me, and I can't let it leave me. I don't know how to explain it, but I can't let it go. You know, and many times it's just looking at somebody and with they got their head down and you just smile at them. That person might be thinking about suicide, but that smile might give them hope for that day, and they're going to make it through another day, hopefully. It's just the simple things, and it's not necessarily all about money. It's just being kind and considerate and just showing people you're concerned about them. A lot of times you just have to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that happened to you. But let's see if you can do a little bit better tomorrow, or, just little tidbits, of, some of the best filling times for me is just going to the grocery store and seeing a lady with pulling out change out of her pocket, and she's got two little kids hanging on to her and trying to buy groceries, pay for those groceries, help her. That those kids are probably don't have the food on the table they need. And, you know, I'm not perfect. I'm just trying to recognize things that I can do maybe to help others have a little bit better life.
Mhm.
Oh,
Well, I am personally very grateful that the Lord let you know that it was time to share your story, and I'm grateful for the many places that you've been able to do so, and to bring this light and love and truth into the world, and it changes people when they hear it. And so I deeply appreciate that, and I thank you for sharing it with our audience. Do you have any last thoughts before we go?
life is precious.
Yes. Thank you, Scott, so much for being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
One last thing before we go. Latter-day Disciples is an original partner and sponsor of Scripture Notes. Scripture Notes is an absolutely incredible application designed to help you deepen your relationship with God through transformative scripture study. I have used Scripture Notes for the last 3 years. I literally cannot say enough great things about this application. I love everything included in it, which is all of the LDS canon. In addition, it has all the Apocrypha, which you guys know I love. I love that it easily gives you access to Bible Hub if you want additional translations of the Bible. It also links to Blue Letter Bible, which I use when I'm looking up the Hebrew and Greek of all the words. Collection Notes is so incredible, allowing you to keep your studies on a particular topic, perhaps that goes intertextually across all of Scripture in one easy location. But honestly, the search engine alone makes this application completely worth it, okay? Again, I have used this for 3 years. I literally could not have written Consider Yourself as Eve without Scripture Notes. So if you haven't already, be sure, go check out Scripture Notes today. Click the link in our bio. You'll get a 2-week free trial, and it is super accessible and cheap after that. It's like $5 a month, okay? So go check out Scripture Notes if you haven't already. Again, thank you so much for being with us. I hope you have a great rest of your day.